As we discussed in the previous lesson, we want to be able to visit /thread/id, like /thread/5, and view the thread with a specified ID. We are going to implement this in this video using ViewRouter, which we now have installed and configured. Let's create a page component for displaying the thread. I will name this one Page Thread Show. It might be tempting to name it just thread, but remember you should always use multi-word names for your components to prevent conflicts with existing and future HTML elements, since all HTML elements are a single word. Additionally, we could name our component just page thread, but we know we will have more pages related to the threads later, like for example page thread edit. At this point, it's perfectly fine if you prefer to go with page thread, but I will call mine page thread show because it's free and it reduces the chances I will need to refactor that later. The look of the thread page will actually be the same as the home page, with the only difference that it will display only one thread. So I will copy the template from home and the script, and I will remove the v4 from the root element. Inside the template, Vue expects that we have a thread object. Which is this thread in our case? The one that is specified in the URL when the users browse. So, we should set up the route configuration and come back to figure out how to find this thread here in our data source. I will add another route object here for our thread. The path will be /thread. I will give it a name of thread show for the reasons I mentioned before. And the component I want to connect it to is the page thread show. Notice how WebStorm imports that for me. Great. Now let's confirm in the browser that it works. If we visit /thread, we get an error because thread is not defined in our component. This is good and it means that our route works. Now let's try to grab the ID. In ViewRouter, to create a dynamic route that will carry a parameter, we use the colon symbol. We specify the name of the param after the colon, and in our case the param is the ID of the thread we want to show. Okay, let's check back in the browser by visiting /thread/NID. Let's use Vue DevTools to inspect what's going on. Under our active component, page thread show, notice that we have a special $route property. In here, there is an option called Params, which we can access from within our component. Here you can also see other useful information regarding the active route. Notice here that we have the ID and the value that is specified in the URL. If I change the URL, the param changes too. Great! So now that we have the ID from the route, we can access it in our component to find the thread. There are a lot of ways to implement that. I like to use a computed property because its value is cast and it will be reactive every time the ID changes. Inside the computed property or any other Vue instance method, we can access the params under this $route.params. In this case, the param we want to access is the ID. That should do the trick. Let's check again and use a valid ID this time in the browser. I got this one from the data.json file. Awesome! We got to see the specified thread. If we change the ID to another one, we get to see another thread. Fantastic! Before we go to the next lesson, I want to give you a small tip. Instead of using $route.params.id in our component, we can instruct ViewRouter to pass the value of the parameter as a component prop to our component. This is a good practice for component self-documentation, as we will define the ID prop. It is also beneficial when it comes to testing, as the component is flexible and not tightly coupled to the router. To pass the ID as a parameter, we add props true to the route. In the page thread show component, we should define the ID prop that will be required and a string. This way, it's clear what our component needs and we don't have to read the full code to understand what parameter it uses and where we get the ID from. In our computed property, I will replace this route params ID with this ID. Back in the browser, everything works the same.